Welcome, folks. Today we're going to talk about debunking the myths about cloud software. So I'm going to turn off my webcam. I just wanted to associate an ugly face with a voice, and many people say I have a voice for radio. So that's a nice way of saying we don't want to see your face. I'm going to turn it off so you can view the whole presentation without seeing me. So that's off. Today, we're going to talk about roughly 10 myths about cloud software that really, as it applies to a legal professional, okay, or an IT professional in the we'll call it the legal IT world, whether it's a law firm or it's a legal department. So with that, let's just dive into the meat and potatoes here. We have actually quite a bit to cover. The first myth, if I get Microsoft 365, I have to use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so forth, all in an Outlook in a browser. I can't use Word, Outlook locally. Well, that's false, right? And actually, you'll know the answer to all these because they're phrased that way, that there's the myth, and then some of them have a little truth to them. So, in fact, this one does as well. You can use Word, Outlook, and so forth in a browser. You have the choice, though, with Microsoft 365, and at least what we recommend is the E3 or E5 licensing model. There is a model when you can only use Word or Outlook locally, but we would never recommend that for a law firm or a legal department. So, and most people don't. Very, very few people do. In that case, I mean, you could use like a Chromebook and just operate within a browser. Most people don't want to operate within a browser, and that's the point, right? And that's the idea behind debunking this particular myth. So you have the choice. You could run Word locally, or you could run it within a browser. On occasion, I have been at a relative's home at a holiday, and I didn't have my computer. I needed to jump on and edit a document in a pinch in an emergency, and I was able to do that within the browser, and that's actually a very convenient thing to be able to do. But I don't want to operate in that browser all the time. It's a little watered down. I want all the full features and so forth. But also take document management as an example. So document management software with NetDocuments in particular. So I'm going to pull up here. Just going to switch between PowerPoint and some applications. This is NetDocuments, and this is a pure cloud-based document management system. And this would be true, by the way, if you were using World Docs or if you were using iManage. Okay, so but I'm going to use I use NetDocuments internally. I'm going to use this as an example. But when I go into a matter, and let's just take this affidavit as an example. You can see this is a Word document. When I click on that, it actually checks the document out. It downloads the document locally in a local cache. Okay, so it's cached local. It's a temp file, right? That's stored locally. And then here's the document. This is local now, and I am. I'll go in. I'll hit enter, and I'll enter item number 4. And so then when I hit save and then close, okay, then this document is uploaded and it's checked back in and it's uploaded. So now there's a temporary copy on my computer that'll stay for usually a couple days. And that's convenient. If I lose internet connectivity, I have access in what they call their Echo folder. And World Docs has a temp folder as well, where it has cached local files that you've touched also. And that's just a good, it's a good convenient feature in case you lose internet connectivity. At least you could touch the documents that you have worked on recently. But now when I go back here, you can see here, it's back, it's checked back in, and it's stored in the cloud. So it's in the cloud right now. And then, but when I work on it, I'm working locally in Word. And then when I close it, it uploads and it's saved back into that central repository. I don't have 50 copies and 50 different computers everywhere. The one official copy is here. The other thing that the online version allows us to do is what we call co-edit. So I can right-click on a document and I can edit in Word Online, and I can co-author or co-edit, meaning two people can edit the document at one time. And that's actually a nice feature, marrying the NetDocuments document management system with that integration with Microsoft 365, which I think is very convenient, that co-authoring capability. Next myth: there are no local files anymore if I go cloud. Again, this kind of ties into my last point. That's not true. There are local files. You still have, for instance, in the example I gave a moment ago, there's an echo folder, there's a temp or a cache folder that stores those documents that you've touched at least recently. So it's usually like the last couple days of documents that you've touched. So I bring this up because of the concept of hard drive encryption. And so it's really important. Most of the time, 9 times out of 10, maybe even 10 times out of 10, I recommend attorneys have laptops. And laptops are mobile. So if you are opening a document, even from a robust document management system, and it downloads locally into an echo folder, and then you close it, there's still local copies of documents. So if somebody stole your laptop, they could access those documents. So it's important that you utilize hard drive encryption still, and you respect the security needs of full disk encryption for your mobile device. That's a kind of a cardinal tenet of cybersecurity. So there are local files still. And take Dropbox as another example. Dropbox is far worse because it synchronizes so many files locally. Same with Box, same with Google Drive. So if you're using those applications, there's even a greater need to encrypt those files. All right, next myth. Once I go cloud, I can never leave, right? And you hear comments like, good luck getting your data back. Well, that's just not true. It's a question that you want to ask in an issue that you plan for with the vendor. Every application treats the data a little differently. Most applications, in fact, every single application that I work with, and I wouldn't work with them if it was any other way, gives me the capability to export or have a local download function. If something comes up that's better, a program that's better 5 years from now, I want to be able to easily divorce myself from that application. So when we talk about document management programs in particular, whether it be WorldDocs, NetDocuments, iManage, or eDocs, there are export utilities in all those legal document management programs. In fact, even SharePoint, right? If you use Microsoft SharePoint for some collaboration or some pseudo document management, they all have the capability to export the data. Some programs are easier to get the documents out of than others. So there's make no mistake about it. To get email out of out of something like NetDocs or WorldDocs is a piece of cake. Now, if you want to try to pull email out of a case management database like Time Matters, that's a different issue. There are all sorts of hoops that you got to jump through and metadata that's actually lost. So not every program is equal. And by the way, Time Matters is not a cloud-based system; it's an older legacy system. So, but all the major cloud applications that I am familiar with, that I work with, it's a non-starter if I can't get my data out. Okay, but it is a conversation and a checklist item that you need to address with the vendor. I can even hug my documents at night via a local nightly backup, right? And like with NetDocuments in particular, I can do a local nightly backup of all my documents. So that is nice. And again, that's something that you want to address with your vendor. If we adopt cloud, I can no longer use long-time legal applications or legacy legal applications like World Docs, Tabs, PC Law, Practice Master, and so forth. That's not true. That's just not true. So let's do a little bit of background. At the end of the day, a cloud is really a data center. There's server farms that have redundant internet, redundant electricity, backup generators, huge cooling systems, high security. That it's your data in somebody else's data center, and there are many flavors of cloud. The two flavors that I want to address with you today are SaaS and then infrastructure as a service. So software as a service or infrastructure as a service. Examples of software as a service would be like a NetDocuments, Clio, Rocket Matter, Centerbase, Cosmolex, that genre of software where the program runs in a browser. Okay, so you saw that a moment ago. This is NetDocuments. I'm in a browser. This is what we call a pure SaaS application. Now, we also have what's called infrastructure as a service. And this is where you no longer buy servers or as many servers that you have locally under your roof, and instead you rent the use of servers in a data center, typically through a vendor, and the vendor loads all of your programs on those servers and then delivers those programs to you via some type of remote desktop technology that's typically pretty high end. Let me give you an example of that. ProCirrus is Azure is another example. Rackspace, Mindshift, those are examples. Let's focus on ProCirrus for a moment. So let me pop over to actually here. We're going to go to, I'm going to log into the ProCirrus ProZone. So when I log in, let's say you use hosted infrastructure. This is an example. I log into my computer, and the very first thing I see is a login screen. Now, you can see here I have a log out button here, means I've already logged in, and then I click this button here to see my ProZone desktop. So instead of seeing the Windows desktop, this is what I see with all of my, these are the ones that I primarily use, but these are all the apps that I have available to me, and I can add others as well. But you can see here, I can click on, here's PC Law. That's a legacy application. When I click on that, PC Law loads. When I click on Microsoft Word down here, it actually loads. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to click on Word, and then boom, there it is. There's Microsoft Word. This looks and feels local. In fact, when I type, it is like real time. It's responsive. It's not like a window within a window. It's not fuzzy. It looks and feels local. It's absolutely beautiful. And that's what this is hosted infrastructure. Think of it as a bubble, and you're in that bubble with all your applications. Instead of having local applications installed on your computer, they're all operating and running and being delivered to you through really high resolution screenshots that gives you a local experience. So what the significance of this is, what this allows you to do is, if you have legacy applications like, and this is very common, time billing and accounting programs. Cloud-based time billing and accounting programs are not as mature as the legacy ones. And so there are many features still that aren't as mature. And so it's quite often the case that a law firm will want to continue or need to continue to use their time billing and accounting system. And so in order to do that, but still be in, quote, the cloud, that this is the cloud, this is infrastructure as a service. I'm maintaining Tabs 3 or PC Law or whatever legacy app, Juris, right? I want to run that still, but I still want the benefits of the cloud. I want to be able to access my applications from anywhere. I have internet connectivity. I want the security of the cloud, and I could do that within the ProZone. So this is what we call a cloud desktop, and we just run our applications within this bubble in this very high resolution, very high quality remote desktop experience. Okay, so again, SaaS, software as a service, so that's pure browser. I launch a browser like NetDocuments, like I showed a moment ago, and I work within the browser. If I have, let's say, World Docs, talk about World Docs for example. With World Docs, there's an option to use their legacy application within a hosted infrastructure environment, or they actually do have a cloud product. And so if you've been using World Docs for years and you don't want to switch programs completely, you could switch to something like World Docs Cloud, right? Which is kind of, it's a little hybrid between remote desktop technology and software as a service. It's not pure software as a service. Okay, so it's not all or nothing, right? And that leads me to my next myth. We need one cloud vendor or platform. That's not true. You could actually have both. In fact, we just worked with a very large law firm in the southern United States, about a 250, 300 user environment that wanted ProCirrus because, again, they wanted the time billing and accounting solution that was only available in a legacy application. And they also wanted NetDocuments for their document management system. So they basically put within their cloud bubble, within their hosted infrastructure, both applications. So they have Word, they have Microsoft 365, they have, in that particular case, they were using Orion, very robust practice management and time billing and accounting solution, especially for larger firms. And then they use NetDocuments for their cloud-based browser SaaS document management system. Very effective. In fact, arguably even more secure, right, than just maybe NetDocs by itself. Although it's really hard to beat. But you basically have a bubble within a bubble, right? A cloud within a cloud. So it's not an all or nothing situation. It can be a mix. It can be a mix. All right, now, if I lose internet connectivity, then I'm toast, right? So if it happens at the office, this is similar to arguments that we received years ago about keeping paper. What if I lose power? Well, use your laptop. It has a battery. Or go home, or go somewhere else, right? So if I'm at the office and I lose internet connectivity, which has happened on I think maybe 2 occasions in the last 6 years, but it can happen. It definitely can happen. I don't want to minimize it. If that happens, you could go home. You could go home and work and work on your home Wi-Fi. You could use your phone as a hotspot, tethering. You could go to Starbucks. If you do that, I do recommend that you have a VPN client so you're at least operating through an encrypted tunnel, or Panera if Starbucks is out. So you have alternative locations. Go to the Bar Association. Again, with these public Wi-Fi locations, I do recommend that you use a VPN. So there are so many alternative sources of internet these days. Typically, what I see most attorneys do, if internet goes out at the office, it's usually quite temporary. They typically will use their smartphone as a hotspot and kind of suffer through a little bit of latency and speed issues. But for the most part, it's pretty painless. The nice thing about so many of these cloud-based applications is it doesn't really require a lot of bandwidth. When I use NetDocuments, the only time I'm going to really use that bandwidth is if I'm downloading a 1,000-page PDF. That's where I'm going to really feel it. That might take 30 or 40 seconds to download if I'm tethering on my phone, whereas it might only take 10 or 15 seconds if I'm working off my office internet connectivity. But generally speaking, you're not toast. You've got alternative sources of internet connectivity. All right, next big myth. it's unethical or a violation of the attorney rules of professional conduct to store client information in cloud applications. I'm going to couple that with the next one too. We're going to address both of these together. And that is, Dropbox isn't safe for attorneys to store or send links. So, at the end of the day, there's several rules at play, right? There's the rule of competence. We have a duty to maintain the requisite knowledge and skill in order to keep abreast of the practice of law, including the benefits and risks of relevant technology, right? And that is the new language that we see in Rule 1.1. The other real big one, the others are important too, but 1.6 is kind of the key. Let's go over some of this language. So I'm pulling up the model rules because there are probably folks here that are from outside of just one state. So I'm pulling up the model rules, and this has been adopted in at least Rule 1.1 has been adopted in a majority of the states. But this is the additional language that we see highlighted. But in Rule 1.6, 1.6 is our duty to keep information confidential, and the relevant language here is that what we see highlighted. We have to act competently to safeguard information, right? And then the factors to be considered are the factors to be considered in determining reasonableness, because it's a reasonableness standard, include, right, the sensitivity of the information, the likelihood of disclosure, the cost of the solution, the difficulty of the solution, and of course, a client may require that we use special security measures. So without going into great detail, this is just it's a reasonableness standard. What does that equate to? Simple terms, is your data segregated? Okay, is it encrypted, in transit, and at rest? Who holds the encryption key? Is it a company that is reputable and in the business of data storage? Or is it Crazy Kenny's or Little Joe's computer service operating out of a basement? Is there backup? Is there redundancy? Does the vendor escrow money for operations in case they go bankrupt? Do they disclose confidential information if they're served a court order? Right? Who owns the data? This one's a deal stopper. You absolutely have to retain ownership of the data, and if the end user agreement says otherwise, that's a done deal. That's a non-starter. You have to maintain ownership. So those are the primary factors. There are some way more than others, but let's talk about security in that regard in our next myth that we want to debunk, and that is cloud is always more secure than on-prem. That's just, there's truth to that, but it's not always true, and that's why I wouldn't just give this an outright falseness. In the past, cloud computing was actually perceived as less secure than on-premise capability, we have an on-premise capabilities, and that was definitely true, 15 to 20 years ago. However, security breaches in the public cloud, however rare they are, most of them involve some type of misconfiguration of the cloud service or a bad acting inside character, as in the case in the early days of actually two cases in the early examples of using Dropbox, which gave it a little bit of a black eye, and why we hear that question being asked, is Dropbox really safe? Today, a majority of the cloud providers invest in significant security. It doesn't mean that security is guaranteed in the cloud. Every vendor is different. There are different levels of security that cloud providers have. It doesn't protect you from local incompetence. For instance, a user who clicks on a link in a phishing scam, right? Chances are you're safer because of the controlled environment. But take Proceris as an example. If you went to a hosted infrastructure environment like Proceris, every computer is going to have full disk encryption. Every computer has carbon black, artificial intelligence, antivirus, and malware protection. Every computer has two-factor authentication, right? So if a password is compromised, but it doesn't guarantee, like that's a different situation. Proceris is different than if you just had Clio, or you just had net documents. And chances are your client data in those applications are very safe, but if you download a document and you don't have full disk encryption on your computer, then that isn't safe. So, and every vendor is different. You want to really explore that. These are just a couple snapshots of certifications that Net Documents has obtained, and FedRAMP, they're in their final stages, which is an enormous investment. But the millions of dollars that they pour into security on an annual basis is nowhere near what you could accomplish under your own roof. It just can't be done unless you have endless amounts of money, and you would definitely be losing profitability if you spent money on all of these things. But you can leverage that with, you look at a service like Net Documents who has hundreds of thousands of users, and in which case you leverage the cost that we all pay into using that service. They spend a percentage of that on world-class security. So now I benefit from SOC 2 compliance and ISO compliance and FINRA and HIPAA and FedRAMP and all that. I have that security in my environment because we're all paying into it. And it's like it's part of our paying taxes. A part of that goes into world-class security. And that's just not something that especially a small business can even come close to. So there is, but listen, compare this with another vendor, and these folks, Net Documents, are at the other end of the spectrum. They probably have some of the best security that I've ever seen in any even cloud-based application. Go to a kind of a new pop-up cloud-based application, and they may only have a couple of these certifications, right? So you want to ask, you need to explore that. It's not a given. Here's a last one. If I have Microsoft 365, and boy, I hear this all the time. If I have my Microsoft 365, formerly known as Office 365, with hosted email exchange, then I have backup, and that's not true. That's not true. You typically have redundancy. So if a server went out in their data center, you wouldn't even see a blip on your screen. Another data center kicks in another part of the country, and so there's redundancy of data. So if that server got wiped out, you're going to have a copy of that data on another server, probably on dozens of other servers. So but that's what we call redundancy. That's not a point-in-time backup. If you want point-in-time backup with Microsoft 365, then you need to use a third-party vendor like Veeam, is a very popular one, and that allows you to get a point-in-time backup and recovery of your email, or even it could be your documents as well. If you need a backup of a particular document recovered from yesterday at 3 o'clock. Okay, so that's different. But be clear, Microsoft 365 provides redundancy, which is a form of backup, but it's not a point-in-time backup. You need a solution like Veeam. All right, that concludes the dozen or so myths that I wanted to debunk for you. Thank you for attending today. At this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Karen to wrap things up.
Great. Thank you, Paul, for clearing up all those myths and fears. I hope that everyone feels better about cloud now. So great job. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for attending. If you are intrigued by Paul's presentation this afternoon and want to learn more about cloud solutions and security, or have any other document management questions, I encourage you to take advantage of our free 30-minute DMS consultation. This is your chance to speak with one of the DMS experts at Affinity and get those important questions answered. Just reply to the follow-up email I'm about to send, and I'll do the rest. We do have more DMS-focused sessions coming soon. Next up in August, we'll be looking at workspaces in Net Documents. You can find information about all of our upcoming DMS sessions by jumping onto affinityconsulting.com/webinars. Please do share your feedback with us on the survey that follows, and I hope you'll join us again soon. Stay safe and healthy, everyone.